Members of the Homestead Mennonite Church and Mennonite Disaster Service volunteers gather to pray as they struggle with the Hurricane Andrew aftermath. Just a few days earlier, on Sunday, August 23, 1992, Pastors Walter and Joy SAWATZKY faced a difficult decision: to abide by the mandatory evacuation notice or to stay in Homestead alongside other members of the congregation.
So by 5:30 or so, we knew we were staying at the church.
As thousands fled for safety, some families chose to stay at home. The SAWATZKYs were joined by two other families at the church.
Even midnight, 1:30, everything was clear, and we were watching the news on TV and cooking up food so it wouldn't spoil. And finally, about 1:30, 2 o'clock, people started going to bed. 2:30, we got a phone call. Someone from this neighborhood, their power went out, so things were starting to blow.
When the first wind started coming, we tried to get a little rest, and then it started making a lot of noise. And then Dick and I went outside to watch a little bit, and it's very fascinating to watch the huge blue arcs of transformers exploding in the sky, and how piece by piece Homestead went dark.
But you could hear the shingles start peeling back. You could hear the roof peeling off the church, and you could hear huge objects hitting the building, hitting the windows. And then about 5 o'clock, that all subsided, and it was the eye.
The eye traveled right over the church. We stepped outside for a few minutes, and you could see it. It looked like a moon, and right in the middle, you could see the stars, and quiet, calm, and then it started back up again.
And then you're hit by the wall, and that's supposedly the worst winds of the hurricane. So when that wall hit, it was like a freight train coming. Some people started getting under tables and singing and praying, and water was just pouring in. So we tried to rescue the new hymn books, get the new hymn books, get the furniture out, get the piano out, get all the equipment out.
It saved our lives that this was our shelter. This is where we came the night of the storm. I don't know where else we would have gone. Yeah, it was real comforting because it was real scary, and it was nice to be with other people, and we felt safe.
The only thing left really standing around here is the church. Mm-hmm. The church really held up. Yeah, it did. And I think the Lord wanted it that way.
The Homestead community woke up to what looked like a war zone.
About 7 o'clock, the wind started to subside, and then people started coming in. The neighbors started pouring into the church, and you could tell by the looks on their faces how bad the hurricane was. They were just in shock. They're, like a medical shock. Their faces were white.
Numbed by the devastation, members of the Homestead Mennonite Church began to reach out to each other and to their community. Storm victims weren't alone in their shock. Cleanup volunteers also found it difficult to cope with the destruction caused by the storm.
Man, I had to get out of there. You just couldn't, we stayed and we would walk in the house, and I don't know how the people do it. I don't know. It's, they're amazing. A woman walked us back in and showed us that where she and her husband had hid in the closet all night long while the storm pounded their house. The wind was blasted out, and the roof caving in. Insulation and stuff from this attic everywhere. No ceiling in the house. You just look up at the back side of the roof. You see through the roof. It's amazing. And it wasn't just one, it's every single house down the street.
Hurricane Andrew, one of the most destructive in American history, left thousands of people homeless. Some estimates project as many as 80% of all homes in the area either destroyed or condemned by the officials.
I guess we were shocked. As we started coming down the road, of course, it was just amazing. We couldn't quite fathom all this kind of destruction.
Phil and Lou Ann Martin, longtime members of Homestead Mennonite Church, were in Sarasota during the storm. They returned to total devastation.
As we were getting closer, I started realizing how I was getting used to the park and liking it here and getting to know our neighbors. And then we saw that piano over there, that he put a lot of work into it. That was kind of difficult.
As the Martins struggled with the loss of home and belongings, they turned to their community of faith for help.
We stopped at the church, which was sort of the check-in spot for all the families. And so we stopped there and saw people, and then had about a half hour before the curfew and came over here and checked out the trailer.
We're so involved with the church that it's just kind of like the hub. never felt alone because of the fact that, you know, the church is there and that we're not going to be homeless. I mean, we kind of feel homeless because we, you know, need a place to stay. But when, you know, when you see all the food and all the water, everything, that's, I mean, you never worried about having to stand in long lines and just knew that we'd be taken care of that way.
June MacDougall and her husband Miles survived the storm in their home. They have a lot to be thankful for.
But if it wasn't for the church, we'd be in just as bad a shape as everybody, because the roof would just be, you know, falling down. You know, by now, we'd be in a mess.
The MacDougalls are members of the Homestead Mennonite Church. Like the Martins, they too found help from the church. Within days after the storm, more than 50 MDS, Mennonite Disaster Service volunteers, began cleanup and reconstruction work in the area. MDS, the Domestic Disaster Response Organization for the Mennonite and other Anabaptist churches, set up its headquarters at the Homestead Mennonite Church.
Ours was the first house to get dried in the day after the hurricane. I was so amazed, and I was so grateful.
This was not the first disaster experienced by the Homestead congregation. 4 years before Hurricane Andrew, fire destroyed the church building. MDS was instrumental in the reconstruction of the meeting house.
People from all over the church did help us to rebuild our church. And because of that experience, many of us, the night of the storm, were praying, Lord, keep the roof on this church. Let us be a blessing to other people. The first thing we wanted to see in the morning is the roof on our church, so that we could be a blessing here in our community. And with the help of Mennonite Disaster, we are now able to be. But if our church had not burned before, our building would have been too small. I just knew that somehow God had his hand over this building site, and there was a purpose for it. And we're seeing it all come together.
While the news media heralded the arrival of the military forces in tent cities, MDS moved in quietly, almost unnoticed, and began preparations for a long stay. Overnight, the new church building became a community center. Sunday school classrooms were quickly transformed into storage rooms for everything from food to cleaning supplies.
Our relationship with God. It is through faith in Jesus Christ that we are going to be...
The fellowship area became a cafeteria for the MDS volunteers and a clearing center for jobs to be done in the area. Donated goods were brought in wheelbarrow by wheelbarrow. The work grew as the gifts arrived, with food and supplies to be organized and shared within the congregation and throughout the neighborhood.
I did not know about the disaster team until Reverend Walter told me about it. They were going to send a team of people out to my home to help me. It's God's blessings sending miracles into my life at a time when I desperately needed God's people doing God's work, people that need it so bad. I'm sorry. It's just a blessing because I do not know what I would have done through all this trauma and trial if it had not been for Reverend Walter and Joy, his wife, and all the members of the church. And they have been so compassionate, so caring, and never expecting anything, not even a thank you. I just did not know people like that really existed anymore. It restores your faith and your trust.
Ironically, Hurricane Andrew became an opportunity for the Homestead faith community to reach out, to put others first, even under difficult circumstances.
We want to be here as a church to reach out to the community around us and help people along with that and help them with rebuilding. And we hope that, you know, even out of this disaster, that we'll be able to share some of God's love with other people.
They were the first to help in the relief. They helped my neighbors. They had nowhere to go. They have food, shelters. You could even take a shower over there. They were kind enough to put tar paper on our roof. They've done a lot of houses in the neighborhood.
This was an opportunity to show Christ in action. We kind of got some stuff written on the front of the building, brought a lot of attention, you know, including the neighbors. So it's the walk that meets the talk. You know, what you do in the time when the chips are down that really matters. Is to people.
The Homestead Mennonite congregation looks ahead to a new future.
There's a deep sense that there's going to be a pre-Andrew and a post-Andrew kind of church here in Homestead. Someone said, we're going to be a church without walls from now on.
It's like the hurricane hasn't stopped yet.
We're going to be much more clearly connected to the community and the people. There'll be much more coming and going. It'll be relationships and developing networks of support for people in the neighborhood that will be what church will be for us.
Church members and MDS volunteers join in the effort to rebuild the Homestead community. Together, they rediscover what it means to be part of Christ's church.